James Marshall's unearthing of gold at Sutter's Mill in California in 1848 kicked off the California gold rush. Born in 1810, Marshall inherited his father's knack for carpentry and wheelwrighting. Following his father's death in 1834, he ventured westward, making stops in Illinois and Indiana before eventually settling in Missouri. It was during his time there that he fell ill with malaria, prompting his doctor to recommend another move westward. In July 1845, he made his way to the Sacramento Valley and started working for John Sutter as a carpenter. Doing well there, he improved his financial situation, bought a ranch, and began raising cattle. By 1846, he had joined John C. Fremont's California Battalion and took part in the Bear Flag Revolt, an attempt to wrest control of California from Mexico. Upon returning to his property, he discovered that his cattle had been stolen, forcing him to sell his land. He then teamed up with John Sutter to construct a sawmill. It was at this sawmill, on January 24, 1848, that he stumbled upon gold in the water flowing through the mill's tail race. He promptly informed Sutter, who made all his workers promise to keep it under wraps. But news of the discovery spread like wildfire nonetheless. As news rapidly circulated, around 80,000 miners swarmed the region, stretching across the Sacramento Valley and encroaching on Sutter's territory. Ironically, neither Sutter nor Marshall reaped the benefits of the discovery that could have made them rich on their own. Despite Marshall's attempts to stake his own claims in the gold fields, he didn't succeed. His sawmill also faltered, as every capable man rushed off in pursuit of gold. Before long, the vicinity near Sutter's Mill transformed into California's inaugural mining boomtown, Coloma. Disheartened by his previous experiences, Marshall departed the region, wandering from one place to another in California in hopes of striking it rich once more. In 1857, he came back to Coloma and initiated a vineyard during the early 1860s. Initially successful, his pursuits in winemaking eventually faltered when, towards the end of the decade, heightened competition and reduced demand forced him out of business once more. Marshall then reverted to prospecting and roaming the state. He soon entered into a partnership with another miner in a gold mine near Kelsey, California. However, the mine's development proved costly and yielded nothing, leaving the unfortunate Marshall on the brink of financial ruin. In 1872, Marshall experienced a stroke of luck when the California state legislature granted him a 2-year pension in acknowledgement of his contribution to a pivotal period in California history. The pension was extended in 1874 and 1876, but ceased in 1878. According to folklore, Marshall visited the Legislative Assembly in person to secure the renewal of his pension. However, no further pension was granted when a bottle of brandy fell from his pocket and rolled onto the floor. Marshall remained in Kelsey, residing in a modest homesteader's cabin and making a living from a small garden until he passed away on August 10, 1885. His remains were then transported to Coloma and laid to rest on the land where he once owned his vineyard. Perched above the South Fork of the American River, a monument was erected at his grave site in 1890. At the pinnacle of the monument stands a bronze statue of Marshall, indicating the precise location where he left an indelible mark on California history. Throughout his life, James W. Marshall attained legendary status as the discoverer of gold in California. Upon Marshall's passing in 1885, his friend Andrew Monroe, a black man from Coloma, laid him to rest. Andrew's narrative traces back to his mother, Nancy Gooch, a slave woman from Missouri. In 1849, Nancy gave birth to Andrew in Missouri but soon left him behind. She journeyed to California with her masters, arriving during the gold rush frenzy that same year. Realizing the opportunity for freedom, Nancy embraced independence as the miners rejected slave or peon labor in the mines. California entered the Union as a free state in 1850, and by then, Gooch had been working independently for almost a year as a laundress and domestic for the miners. She managed to accumulate sufficient gold to secure her son's freedom and return to Missouri. The exact year Andrew arrived in California is uncertain, but he came as a young man, already married to Sarah Ellen. Over time, the Monroe family acquired 80 acres in Coloma, where they ran a successful fruit farm. By the 1880s, their land holdings had expanded to 320 acres. Sarah Ellen bore 9 children, although 2 died shortly after birth. The family is interred at the Coloma Pioneer Cemetery. The Monroe Ridge Trail, starting at the Marshal Monument in Coloma, commemorates their pioneering legacy. Mrs. Ellen Mason was among the early arrivals in the mining areas and was among the first women on the Georgetown Divide. Initially a slave, she gained her freedom in 1849 and journeyed westward with the multitude drawn by the California gold rush. Mrs. Mason toiled tirelessly as a laundress for the miners, who compensated her in gold for her services. Over time, she used her earnings to purchase her 2 sisters out of slavery, and the trio settled in Georgetown. Mrs. Mason continued to reside there until relocating to Oakland in 1878. She passed away in 1908 at the age of 96. In 1870, Addison and Florence Tirey settled along Weber Creek. Addison, originally born a slave in Virginia, gained his freedom and relocated to California. There he met his wife Florence Cordelia Tirey, who was of Indian descent and had been raised and educated by a white family in Tulare County. Despite being recognized as a commendable individual, neighbor, provider, and prosperous vintner, Addison faced the first of numerous violent tragedies just 1 year after their arrival in the area. As Addison was laboring near Morill's Bridge, a Placerville resident named James Riley unlawfully entered the Tirey residence and brutally murdered Florence. According to the editor of the Mountain Democrat, Addison discovered his wife's lifeless body, horrifically mutilated by multiple knife wounds that extended from below the knees to the throat, numbering around a dozen. Riley absconded with $50 in cash, a revolver, a watch, and various articles of his victim's attire. For the ensuing 2 decades, Riley's identity remained shrouded in mystery. Many suspected Addison of his wife's murder, casting a shadow of doubt over him. 2 years following Florence's death, he fatally shot a man on Placerville's Main Street after being stabbed thrice in an unexpected assault. Despite being apprehended, authorities released him under the belief that he had acted in self-defense. On the 41st anniversary of Florence's death, Addison met a tragic fate when his horses bolted while he was returning home from Placerville one evening. Both of Tirey's legs got tangled in the runaway, dragging him for miles. He was discovered 20 hours later and taken to the county hospital, where he passed away 3 days later, at the age of 62. During those 2 decades between Florence's death in 1871 and Riley's deathbed confession in 1891, Tirey relocated to Ringgold. There, he married his second wife and established a thriving vineyard. He also ensured the school had a steady supply of firewood. The couple actively participated in community social events. Additionally, his second wife frequently worked at the governor's mansion for the First Lady and served as a midwife in the Ringgold area. Nelson Ray, born into slavery, likely lost his parents at a young age and was taken in by a white family, John and Valinda Ray of Missouri. Valinda, widowed in 1846, emancipated Nelson in her will. In 1852, Nelson Ray made his way to Placerville, where he toiled as a miner. His mining endeavors proved highly lucrative. Within just a year, he amassed enough gold to buy freedom for his wife, Lucinda, and their children. The price tag for their emancipation, $3,700. The family made their home in Placerville, owning the land where the post office now stands, as well as numerous rental properties that brought in income. Nelson is credited with constructing a church in the vicinity, serving an all-black congregation. From slavery to the frontier, African-American men and women pioneers ventured to these Sierra foothills, seeking a brighter future and a piece of the American dream.